My name is Annabelle Thompson, and I'm 28 years old. 4 weeks ago, my parents sold my grandmother's antique piano, the one she promised would be mine, and used all $95,000 to buy my sister a brand new Mercedes. They thought Grandma was too sick in hospice to ever find out. They thought I was too weak to tell her. They were wrong. When I finally told Grandma what they'd done, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply reached for her phone, dialed one number, and said 7 words that would destroy everything my parents thought they owned. Before I tell you what those 7 words were, and what happened next at my mother's 60th birthday party, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Drop a comment, and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me take you back to the day it all started, the afternoon my grandmother was admitted to hospice. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, right after my last piano lesson of the day. "Eleanor's had another heart attack," my father said. No greeting, no warmth. "She's stable, but they're moving her to hospice. Family meeting at the hospital in an hour." I dropped everything. By the time I arrived, my parents and my sister Megan were already huddled in a corner of the waiting room, speaking in low voices. My father, Richard Thompson, stood with his arms crossed. My mother Diane clutched her designer purse like a lifeline, and Megan, 4 years younger, always the favorite, was scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. "Good, you're here," my father said. "We need to divide responsibilities. Not, how are you holding up? Not, this must be hard for you. Just logistics. Someone needs to visit Mother daily," he continued. "Diane and I have the business to run. Megan's in a critical phase with Daniel's family." Daniel Harrison. Megan's boyfriend of 8 months, son of my father's most important business partner. "So, Annabelle," my father looked at me like he was assigning a chore. "You'll handle the visits. Your schedule is flexible. Teachers don't exactly work overtime." I wanted to say that I taught music to 37 children every week, that I ran after-school programs, that my time had value too, but I didn't. "Of course," I said quietly. "I want to be with her anyway." "Perfect." My father was already turning away. "Keep us updated if anything changes." As I walked toward Grandma's room, I heard my mother's voice drift down the hallway, meant for Megan's ears alone. "At least she's useful for something." I kept walking. I didn't turn around. Not because I didn't hear, but because I'd grown so used to this kind of pain that I'd stopped expecting it to be acknowledged. Grandma Eleanor's room smelled like lavender and old books. She insisted on both. "They try to make everything smell like antiseptic," she told me on my first visit. "I refuse. If I'm going to die, I'll die surrounded by things I love." She was 76, sharp as a blade, and dying of congestive heart failure. The doctors gave her weeks, maybe a month or two if she was lucky. I visited every day after school. We talked about music, about her years performing across concert halls in the Northeast, about my students who couldn't yet read notes, but already felt rhythm in their bones. One evening, she reached for my hand. Her grip was weaker than I remembered, but her eyes were fierce. "Annabelle, I need you to know something." "Anything, Grandma." "The Steinway." She paused, letting the words settle. "My mother's piano, the one from 1892. I knew it well. I'd learned my first scales on those ivory keys when I was 7 years old. That piano had been the soundtrack of my childhood, the only place in the family where I felt truly seen. "It's yours," she said firmly. "I've already told Richard and Diane. Told them last month, in front of everyone. That piano belongs to you." I remembered that conversation. My father's jaw tightening. My mother exchanging a look with Megan. My sister rolling her eyes and muttering something about sentimental junk. "Grandma, you don't have to." "I want to." She squeezed my hand. "You're the only one who understands what it means. Promise me you'll take care of it." "I promise." She smiled then, a knowing smile that seemed to hold secrets I couldn't yet see. "There are some things more valuable than money, child, and some people who need to learn that lesson the hard way." 2 weeks later, everything changed. Grandma had asked me to bring some old photographs from her house, pictures of her performing days, images she wanted to see one last time. I still had a key, so I drove over after school on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The house was quiet, too quiet. I walked through the foyer, past the dining room, and into the living room where the Steinway had stood for 30 years. The space was empty. I stopped breathing. Where the piano should have been, there was nothing but a rectangular indent in the carpet, a ghost of something that had lived there for decades, now violently removed. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. "Mom," my voice cracked. "Where's Grandma's piano?" A pause. Then my mother's voice, casual and dismissive. "Your father handled it. Adult matters, Anna. You don't need to worry about it." "Handled it how? Where is it?" I said, "Don't worry about it." "Mom." Click. She hung up on me. I stood in that empty living room for what felt like hours, staring at the indent in the carpet. The rain pattered against the windows. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. I drove to my parents' house that evening. My father answered the door with a glass of scotch in his hand, looking annoyed at the interruption. "The piano," I said. "What did you do?" He didn't even flinch. "Sold it. Got 95,000 for it. Good price." The world tilted. "You sold it? Grandma said it was mine." "Grandma's dying, Anna." He took a sip of his drink. "She doesn't need a piano, and neither do you." Behind him, I heard the jingle of car keys. Megan appeared in the hallway, grinning. New keys. For a new car. "You bought her a car." My voice was flat. "With Grandma's piano." My father shrugged like I'd asked about the weather. "Mercedes-Benz. Megan needs to make the right impression on the Harrisons. Daniel's family is particular about appearances." "That piano was supposed to be mine." "And what would you do with it?" My mother appeared behind my father, arms crossed. "You teach children's music classes, Anna. You don't perform. You don't have the space. Megan needed that money for her future." Her future. I repeated the words, tasting their bitterness. Megan sauntered into the foyer, swinging her new keys like a trophy. "Don't be jealous, Anna. It's not a good look." She smiled, all teeth. "Maybe if you'd picked a better career, you could afford nice things too." I looked at my parents, at my sister, at the life they'd built where I was always the afterthought, always the one whose needs came last. "Does Grandma know?" Silence. "Does she know you sold her piano?" My mother's face hardened. "She's in hospice, Annabelle. She's on morphine half the time. She doesn't need to know anything that might upset her." "You mean you don't want her to know?" "I mean—" My mother stepped closer, her voice dropping to something cold and threatening. "That if you tell her, and it causes her stress, and something happens, that will be on you. Do you want to be responsible for killing your grandmother?" The accusation hung in the air like poison. I should have backed down. The old Annabelle would have. But something had shifted inside me. Something had finally broken. "Grandma has a right to know what happened to her property," I said quietly. "And I won't lie to her." I turned and walked out before they could respond. I didn't sleep that night. My apartment felt smaller than usual, a modest one-bedroom that my parents had always mocked as proof of poor life choices. I sat on my second-hand couch, staring at a framed photograph on the bookshelf. Grandma Eleanor at her final concert, 20 years ago. Her fingers poised above the keys, her face luminous with purpose. That same piano. The one they'd sold like it was nothing. My mother's words circled in my head. "If something happens, that will be on you." Was she right? If I told Grandma, would the shock hurt her? Would I be causing more pain in her final days? But then I remembered what Grandma had always taught me. "Truth can wound," she'd said once, when I was 12 and didn't want to tell my parents I'd failed a math test. "But lies always wound deeper, they just take longer." I pulled my knees to my chest and thought about the last 28 years. Every time I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace, Every time I'd accepted less because fighting felt futile. Every time I'd made myself smaller so my family could feel bigger. And where had it gotten me? Here. Alone. Invisible. Watching them erase Grandma's wishes like her words meant nothing. If I stayed silent now, I wasn't keeping peace. I was becoming complicit. By 3 in the morning, I'd made my decision. Grandma deserved the truth. She deserved to know that her son had stolen from her, lied to her, and assumed she was too weak to matter anymore. And maybe, just maybe, I deserved to stop apologizing for existing. I set my alarm for early morning. I would go to hospice before school. I would tell her everything. Grandma was awake when I arrived, propped up against her pillows, watching the sunrise through the window. "You look like you haven't slept," she said softly. "I haven't." I pulled a chair close to her bed, took her hand. "Grandma, I have to tell you something, and it's going to hurt." Her eyes, still sharp despite everything, studied my face. "Then tell me." So I did. The empty space in her living room, the $95,000, the Mercedes-Benz gleaming in Megan's name, my father's casual dismissal, my mother's threat. I told her all of it, bracing myself for tears, for shock, for the kind of devastation that might break what was left of her fragile heart. Instead, Grandma Eleanor let out a long, slow breath. Not a gasp of pain, not a cry of betrayal, a sigh, the sigh of someone who had seen this coming. "Grandma?" I whispered. She turned to look at me, and her expression wasn't grief-stricken. It was calm, almost resigned. "I knew this might happen, sweetheart." "You knew?" "I know my son." Her voice was steady. "I've watched him become this person for 40 years. I hoped he'd change, but I also prepared for the possibility that he wouldn't." My mind raced. Prepared how? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached toward her bedside table. "Hand me my phone, would you?" I passed it to her, confused. She scrolled through her contacts with surprising dexterity, found a name, and pressed call. Then she put it on speaker. 3 rings. Then a man's voice, deep and measured. "Eleanor, how are you feeling?" "I'm dying, Harold, but I'm clear-headed. And it's time." A pause. "I understand. When?" "Sunday. Diane's birthday party. At my house. I'll prepare the documents." "Thank you, old friend." She ended the call and looked at me with a small, knowing smile. "Grandma." I stared at her. "Who is Harold?" "Harold Jennings." She set the phone down gently. "He's been my attorney for 30 years. He was your grandfather's closest friend." "You have your own attorney?" "I have many things your father doesn't know about, Annabelle." Her eyes twinkled despite the exhaustion etched into her face. "Richard assumes he understands everything about my affairs. He's always assumed that. It's his greatest weakness." I felt like I was standing at the edge of something vast, looking down into depths I couldn't see. "What's happening on Sunday? At Mom's birthday party?" "Justice." Grandma squeezed my hand. "Delayed, perhaps, but justice nonetheless. I don't understand." "You don't need to understand everything yet." She leaned back against her pillows, suddenly looking more tired. "I just need you to do one thing for me. Anything. Come to the party, dress nicely, and bring your patience." A ghost of a smile. "The kind of patience I taught you when you were learning Chopin and wanted to throw the sheet music across the room." I almost laughed despite everything. "That bad?" "Worse." Her expression softened. "But necessary. Your father and mother need to learn that actions have consequences. And I've spent 5 years making sure that when the lesson finally came, it would be unforgettable." 5 years. She'd been planning something for 5 years. "Grandma, what did you do?" She closed her eyes, exhaustion winning out. I protected you, sweetheart, the way I should have protected you all along. I'm only sorry it took me so long to act. I sat with her until she fell asleep, my mind spinning with questions. Harold Jennings. Sunday. My mother's birthday party in Grandma's house. Something was about to change. I could feel it. I just didn't know what. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in a small law office on the outskirts of Philadelphia. Harold Jennings was nothing like I'd expected. He was in his late 60s, with silver hair and gold-rimmed glasses, his movements slow but precise. His office smelled of old leather and paper, lined floor to ceiling with legal volumes. Annabelle Thompson. He extended his hand. Your grandmother speaks of you constantly. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Mr. Jennings, Harold, please. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Sit. Your grandmother asked me to explain a few things before Sunday. I sat. My hands were trembling slightly. Your grandmother is a remarkable woman, Harold began. She's also far more astute than her children give her credit for. She's been observing and planning. Planning what exactly? He folded his hands on the desk. Tell me, Annabelle, do you know who owns the house your parents live in? They do. Grandma gave it to them when Grandpa died. Harold's expression didn't change. Is that what they told you? It's what everyone says. Everyone's wrong. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer and slid it across to me. Your grandmother allowed Richard and Diane to live in that house rent-free, but she never transferred ownership. Not legally, not ever. I stared at the document in front of me. The property deed. Eleanor Whitmore's name, clear as day, no transfer, no amendment. They've been living in her house for 10 years, I said slowly, thinking it was theirs. Precisely. My head was spinning. But why would Grandma let them believe? Because she was watching Annabelle. Harold leaned forward, watching to see if her son would prove her fears wrong. Unfortunately, he did exactly what she expected. That night, I returned to my apartment and began searching. Grandma had given me a box of old belongings years ago. Photographs, letters, pressed flowers from her garden. I'd never looked through it carefully. It felt too intimate, like reading someone's diary. But now I needed answers. I found it near the bottom, beneath a stack of faded concert programs. A sealed envelope, yellowed with age. My name, written in Grandma's elegant script. And beneath it, 6 words, for Annabelle, when you need to understand. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph, a copy of a legal document. The header was partially obscured, but I could see Grandma's signature at the bottom, dated 5 years ago. And in her handwriting, a note clipped to the corner. The house never left my hands, sweetheart. It was only borrowed, and some borrowers don't deserve the privilege. I read it 3 times. Then I understood. Sunday's party was being held at Grandma's house. The same house my parents treated as their own, where they'd hosted dinner parties and holiday gatherings, where they'd sold the piano that sat in the living room like it belonged to them. But it didn't belong to them. It never had. My father had built his entire sense of status on a foundation that didn't exist. I thought about all the times he'd lectured me about real assets and smart investments. All the times he'd mocked my small apartment while standing in a home he didn't actually own. The irony was almost too perfect. I tucked the letter back into its envelope and set it on my nightstand. Sunday was 3 days away. Whatever Grandma had planned, it was going to happen in the place my parents had claimed as their territory, and they had no idea what was coming. The night before the party, Grandma called. Her voice was weaker than before, and I could hear the effort each word cost her. But her mind was still razor-sharp. Annabelle, are you ready for tomorrow? I think so. I paused. Grandma, are you sure about this? It's Mom's birthday. In front of all those people. That's precisely why it needs to be tomorrow. She took a slow breath. Your father sold my piano in front of everyone. He announced it at that family dinner last month like it was his decision to make. He didn't ask me. He didn't think about you. He assumed I was too weak and you were too quiet to matter. I closed my eyes. I remember. Then you understand why the lesson needs witnesses. Her voice softened. I'm not doing this for revenge, sweetheart. Revenge is empty. I'm doing this because it's right, and because you deserve to be protected, especially after I'm gone. Tears burned behind my eyes. Grandma, I should have acted sooner. I watched how they treated you for years, and I kept hoping Richard would change. That was my mistake. Love made me blind for too long. It's not your fault. Maybe not entirely, but I can still make it right. A pause. I don't have much time left, Annabelle. The doctors say weeks, but I think it's less. I can feel it, so I need to know. Do you trust me? Always. Then come tomorrow. Wear something that makes you feel strong, and no matter what happens, remember, you are not the villain in this story. You never were. We said goodnight. I held the phone against my chest for a long time after she hung up. Tomorrow would change everything. I just had to be ready to let it. Sunday arrived with pale winter sunlight and the kind of crisp air that makes everything feel sharper. Grandma's house, my parents' borrowed house, looked almost festive. Someone had hung a happy 60th birthday banner across the porch. Cars lined the driveway and spilled onto the street. I parked at the far end and sat in my car for a moment, gathering myself. I'd chosen a navy blue dress, simple but elegant. Pearl earrings that Grandma had given me for my 21st birthday. My hair pinned back neatly, armor for a battle I didn't fully understand. Inside, the house buzzed with about 30 guests. Aunts and uncles I saw only at holidays, neighbors from the old days, a handful of my father's business associates. I recognized Mr. Harrison near the fireplace, Daniel standing beside him with Megan on his arm. The living room drew my eye immediately. The corner where the Steinway had stood for 30 years was empty. Someone had placed a large potted plant there, trying to fill the void. It looked ridiculous, a leafy green apology for something that couldn't be apologized away. My mother stood near the dining table in a red designer dress, accepting compliments like a queen receiving tribute. My father hovered nearby, working the room with practiced charm, and in the far corner, almost invisible among the crowd, sat Harold Jennings. His leather briefcase rested beside his chair. He caught my eye across the room and gave an almost imperceptible nod. I nodded back. My Aunt Margaret, Grandma's younger sister, appeared beside me. "Anna, sweetheart, how is Eleanor, really?" "Tired," I said honestly, "but still sharp. She always was the smart one." Aunt Margaret's eyes drifted to the empty corner. "I noticed the piano's gone. Richard said Eleanor wanted to sell it?" I opened my mouth to respond, but my father's voice cut through the crowd. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please." My father stood in the center of the living room, crystal glass raised, commanding the space like he owned it, which I now knew he didn't. "Today we celebrate 60 wonderful years of Diane Thompson." Applause. My mother beamed. "And I also want to take a moment to share some exciting family news." My stomach dropped. "As some of you know, our daughter Megan has been seeing Daniel Harrison, son of my dear friend and partner, James." He gestured toward Daniel, who smiled politely. "And to celebrate her bright future, we have a special surprise." He led the entire party outside, where a gleaming silver Mercedes-Benz sat in the driveway, a red bow perched on its hood. "A gift," my father announced proudly, "made possible by Grandma Eleanor's generosity. She sold her antique piano to invest in her granddaughter's future." Megan squealed, threw her arms around my father, and posed for photos beside the car. I stood frozen on the porch. He was doing it again, rewriting the story, making himself the hero while erasing Grandma's wishes entirely. A woman I didn't recognize leaned toward her husband. "Wasn't that piano supposed to go to the other granddaughter, the music teacher?" Her husband shrugged. "Guess plans changed." Aunt Margaret appeared beside me, her face pale. Anna, did Eleanor really agree to this? Before I could answer, Megan spotted me and called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Anna, come take a picture. Don't be jealous. I'm sure Grandma will leave you something too. Maybe her collection of old sheet music? Scattered laughter from the crowd. My hands were shaking. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. And then, behind me, I heard the click of a briefcase opening. Everyone began filing back inside, but Aunt Margaret blocked my father's path. Richard! Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. I need to ask you something. My father's smile didn't waver. Can it wait, Margaret? We're in the middle of... Did you ask Eleanor before you sold that piano? The question landed like a stone in still water. Conversations nearby stuttered to a halt. Mother is in hospice, my father said smoothly. She's not in a condition to make these kinds of decisions. We did what was best for... I spoke with her this morning. Aunt Margaret's voice grew stronger. She's clear-headed, Richard, completely lucid. And she told me you never asked her permission. You never even told her. More people were listening now. I saw Mr. Harrison frown, saw Daniel shift uncomfortably. My mother pushed forward, face flushed. Margaret, this is my birthday. Let's not make a scene. A scene? Aunt Margaret laughed, but there was no humor in it. Diane, your husband sold Eleanor's most precious possession without her knowledge and used the money for a car. If anyone's making a scene, it's not me. The room had gone quiet. 30 pairs of eyes ping-ponged between my aunt and my parents. My father's composure cracked, just slightly. This is a family matter. It doesn't need to be discussed in public. Actually, a new voice said from behind us, I think public is exactly where it needs to be discussed. I turned. Harold Jennings was standing now, his briefcase open, a folder of documents in his hand. He walked toward the center of the room with the calm authority of a man who had done this 1,000 times. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Harold Jennings. I'm Eleanor Whitmore's attorney. My father's face went white. The silence was suffocating. Harold positioned himself near the empty corner where the piano used to stand, a choice that felt deliberate. I apologize for interrupting the celebration, he said, his voice carrying easily across the room. But Eleanor Whitmore has asked me to address some urgent matters regarding her estate. Given the circumstances, she felt it was important that her family, and those close to them, hear this directly. My father found his voice first. My mother has an attorney? Since when? Since 30 years ago, Richard. Harold's tone was polite but cutting. I also represented your father. You would know this if you'd ever bothered to ask. Muffled gasps. Someone in the back whispered, Oh my God. This is outrageous. My mother stepped forward. Eleanor is dying. She's not in her right mind. Whatever papers you have. Mrs. Thompson. Harold raised a hand, silencing her. I visited Eleanor this morning. Her nurse Carol can confirm she is fully competent and lucid. She dictated specific instructions for today's meeting. He opened the folder and removed a document. Now I understand there's been some confusion about property ownership. So let me clarify. He held up the paper. This is the deed to the house we are currently standing in. I watched my father's face drain of color. Notice the name on the deed. Eleanor Whitmore, not Richard Thompson, not Diane Thompson. Harold paused, letting the words sink in. This house has never been transferred. It was never gifted. Your parents have been living here rent-free for 10 years at Eleanor's generosity. Nothing more. The room erupted in whispers. My father grabbed the edge of a chair, steadying himself. Megan stared at her father, confusion and panic warring on her face. And Harold Jennings wasn't done. That, he said quietly, is just the beginning. If you're still here, I'm guessing you're holding your breath the same way I was in that moment. Before I tell you what Harold revealed next, I want to ask you something. Who do you think actually owns that house? My parents. Because surely Grandma must have transferred it at some point. B. Grandma, because there's been a secret all along. Me, because the biggest twist is yet to come. Drop your answer in the comments, then keep watching to find out. My father's voice cracked. This is impossible. Mother said the house was ours. She promised. She promised you could live here. Harold set the deed on the dining table where everyone could see it. She never promised ownership. There's a significant legal difference, Mr. Thompson. I watched the realization spread through the room like wildfire. Mr. Harrison took a small step back from my father. One of the neighbors exchanged a knowing glance with her husband. For 10 years, Harold continued, you've enjoyed this property without paying rent, utilities, or property taxes, all covered by Eleanor's accounts. You've treated it as your own. You've even made modifications without permission. He glanced at the modern light fixtures my mother had installed last year. Legally, you are tenants at will, and the property owner has the right to terminate that arrangement at any time. You can't be serious. My mother's voice was shrill. We've lived here for a decade. We've invested in this house. Invested without authorization. Harold's expression didn't change. Any improvements you've made without written consent belong to the property owner, Eleanor Whitmore. Megan grabbed Daniel's arm. This is insane. Dad, tell them this is some kind of joke. My father couldn't speak. He was staring at the deed like it was a death warrant. I should also mention, Harold added, almost casually, that Pennsylvania law takes property fraud quite seriously. Representing someone else's property as your own, particularly in business contexts, can have significant legal consequences. I saw Mr. Harrison's expression shift from confusion to cold calculation. He was looking at my father differently now, not as a partner, but as a liability. The empire my father had built on borrowed prestige was crumbling before our eyes, and Harold still had more documents in his folder. Now, Harold said, pulling out a second document, we come to the matter of the trust. What trust? My father's voice was barely above a whisper. 5 years ago, Eleanor Whitmore established a separate trust, independent of the will that was shared with your family. This trust was created specifically to protect her most valuable assets in the event of, he paused delicately, financial misconduct. Financial misconduct? My mother sputtered. We're her family. Family members can still commit misconduct, Mrs. Thompson, as recent events have demonstrated. Harold withdrew a thick document, its pages crisp and official-looking. Per the terms of this trust, the following assets are irrevocably assigned to a single beneficiary: the property we're standing in, Eleanor's financial accounts, and all items of sentimental value, including the 1892 Steinway piano that was recently sold without authorization. He looked up, and his gaze settled directly on me. The sole beneficiary is Annabelle Rose Thompson. The room went silent. Megan's shriek broke it. What? This is fraud, my father shouted. She was manipulated. That little... He pointed at me, face contorted with rage. Richard, Harold's voice turned to ice. I would advise you to choose your next words very carefully. Everything said here today has been witnessed by over 30 people. Aunt Margaret moved to stand beside me. Her hand found mine and squeezed. Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing, Harold continued. She spent 5 years watching, waiting, hoping her son would prove her wrong. Instead, he sold her most treasured possession to buy a car for the granddaughter who never visits her. He paused. Actions have consequences, Mr. Thompson. This is yours. My mother was crying now. Megan looked like she might be sick, and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't believe what I was hearing. Harold let the chaos settle for a moment before continuing. Regarding the piano sale, he pulled out another document. Since the Steinway was part of the trust, and Annabelle is the designated beneficiary, the sale conducted without the trustee's consent, that's Eleanor, constitutes unauthorized disposal of trust assets. What does that mean? Megan's voice was small. It means the $95,000 must be returned to the trust within 30 days. Harold's gaze swept across my parents and sister. Failure to comply will result in civil litigation for misappropriation of trust property. Given the clear paper trail, I assure you, the outcome would not be favorable for your family. My father laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. We don't have $95,000 sitting around. The money went to the car. Then I suggest you find a way to liquidate that asset. Harold nodded toward the window, where the Mercedes was still visible in the driveway, red bow and all. The dealer might accept a return, though you'll likely take a significant loss. Megan burst into tears. My car? You're taking my car? I'm not taking anything, Miss Thompson. I'm simply explaining the legal consequences of your family's choices. I watched Megan look to Daniel for support, but he had already stepped away from her, his expression carefully neutral. His father was whispering something in his ear, and neither of them looked sympathetic. Additionally, Harold added, Eleanor has asked me to inform you that your living arrangement in this house will be formally restructured. You may continue to reside here temporarily, but a proper lease agreement will be required. A lease? My mother's voice was barely audible. In the house we've lived in for 10 years? In the house, Harold corrected gently, that you never owned. The room had gone deathly quiet. Every eye was on me. My father turned slowly, his face twisted with betrayal and fury. You did this. You poisoned her against us. I stood my ground. No, Dad. I didn't do anything. My voice was steadier than I expected. Grandma made these decisions 5 years ago. Before I knew anything about them. I only found out this week. Liar! My mother's voice shook with venom. You've always been jealous of Megan, of our family's success. This is your revenge. Revenge? I felt something cold and hard crystallize inside me. I didn't sell Grandma's piano without asking her. I didn't spend the money on a car for myself. I didn't lie to everyone about what happened. I stepped forward, looking directly at my mother. I'm not the one who said at least she's useful for something when I agreed to visit Grandma every day. I'm not the one who hung up on me when I asked questions. And I'm not the one who threatened me, saying I'd be responsible for killing Grandma if I told her the truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Aunt Margaret's hand tightened on mine. I spent 28 years being invisible in this family. My voice didn't waver. I accepted it because I thought that's what love required, shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. I looked at my father, at my mother, at Megan still crying over her doomed Mercedes. But Grandma taught me something different. She taught me that loving yourself means standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. I took a breath. So here's what I want you to understand. I'm not apologizing anymore. I'm not staying silent anymore. And I'm done pretending everything is fine when it isn't. The room was absolutely still. After the crowd began to disperse, slowly, awkwardly, with whispered goodbyes and avoided eye contact, Harold pulled me aside. Annabelle, we need to discuss next steps. I nodded, still feeling surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. Legally, you have several options. He spoke quietly, so only I could hear. You could demand immediate eviction. Given the circumstances, your grandmother would support whatever you decide. I looked across the room at my parents. My father had collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. My mother stood frozen by the window, mascara streaked down her face. Megan had disappeared, probably outside, mourning her Mercedes. They looked broken. Part of me, a small, wounded part, wanted to twist the knife, to make them feel every ounce of the pain they'd caused me over 28 years. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. I don't want to throw them out, I said slowly. Not immediately. Harold raised an eyebrow. Are you certain? Yes. I took a breath. Here's what I want. The $95,000 gets returned within 90 days, not 30. I'll give them time to sell the car and figure things out. They can stay in the house with a formal lease agreement at a minimal rent. After Grandma, I swallowed hard. After she passes, they'll have 12 months to find somewhere else to live. That's remarkably generous, given everything. Maybe. I met his eyes. But I'm not doing this to punish them. I'm doing it because it's right, and because I refuse to become the kind of person they are. Harold studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded, a hint of respect in his expression. Your grandmother said you'd respond this way? She's very proud of you, Annabelle. I know. My voice cracked. I know she is. The agreement was drafted right there on the dining room table, witnessed by Aunt Margaret and two of the remaining guests. My father signed without looking at me. My mother's hand shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. Neither of them said a word. By the time the last signature was in place, the house had emptied. Mr. Harrison and Daniel had left without saying goodbye. I later learned Daniel had driven away while Megan was still outside crying. The birthday cake sat untouched. The banner drooped sadly over the front porch. Aunt Margaret hugged me tight before leaving. You did the right thing, sweetheart. Eleanor would be so proud. She is proud, I said softly. I talked to her this morning. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A video call request from Grandma's hospice number. I answered, walking to the empty corner of the living room where the piano used to be. Her face appeared on screen, pale but peaceful. Nurse Carol was visible in the background, smiling. My brave girl. Grandma's voice was weak but warm. How do you feel? Terrified, I admitted. And relieved, and sad, all at once. That's how courage feels, sweetheart. It's never comfortable. I didn't throw them out. I gave them time. I know. Harold texted me. Her eyes glistened. You're a better person than they deserve, Annabelle. But that's why I chose you. I pressed my hand against the screen, wishing I could hold her hand instead. Thank you, Grandma, for everything, for protecting me. Don't thank me. She smiled, but it was tinged with sorrow. Just live well, play music, be happy. That's how you thank me. I will. I know you will, sweetheart. She closed her eyes. I know you will. I know a lot of you are probably thinking, so that's it? Did your parents ever change? The honest answer is complicated. Not every story has a perfect ending, but every story has a lesson. Before I tell you what happened in the months that followed, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? How hard was it? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. The first week after the party was chaos. News travels fast in small social circles, and the story of what happened at Diane Thompson's 60th birthday spread like wildfire. My father's business partners suddenly became unavailable for meetings. Old friends stopped returning calls. Mr. Harrison formally withdrew from the joint venture they'd been planning. When my father demanded an explanation, the response was cold. I can't do business with someone I can't trust, Richard. If you'd deceive your own mother, what would you do to a partner? The deal would have been worth over $200,000, gone in an instant. Megan had to return the Mercedes. The dealership only offered her $80,000, $15,000 less than my parents had paid. She screamed at the salesman for 20 minutes before finally signing the paperwork. Daniel broke up with her 3 days later via text message. My family thinks it's best if we take some time apart, the message read. Translation: they wanted nothing to do with the Thompson family drama. My sister, who had always been the golden child, found herself suddenly ordinary. No car, no wealthy boyfriend, no special status. She had to borrow my mother's old Honda to get to job interviews. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I simply went about my life, teaching piano to my students, visiting Grandma every evening. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some quiet satisfaction in watching the facades crumble. My father had spent years measuring success in appearances, the house, the car, the right connections. Now he was learning that none of it had ever been real. The foundation he'd built his identity on was borrowed, and borrowed things always have to be returned. 3 weeks after the birthday party, the hospice called me at 6 a.m. You should come now, the nurse said gently. She's asking for you. I drove faster than I should have, my heart pounding the entire way. Grandma's room was quiet when I arrived. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft golden shadows across her bed. Her breathing was shallow, her face paper-thin, but her eyes were open, and when she saw me, she smiled. "My Annabelle." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Come sit with me." I took her hand. It felt so fragile, like holding a bird. "I have something to tell you," she said slowly. "Something I should have said years ago." "What is it, Grandma?" "I'm sorry." I blinked. "Sorry? For what?" "For not acting sooner." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I watched how they treated you, year after year. I kept hoping Richard would change, that Diane would see your value. I made excuses because I didn't want to believe my own son could be so—" She trailed off. "It's not your fault," I said, my own tears falling now. "Maybe not entirely, but I could have done more. I could have protected you earlier, instead of waiting until I was dying." She squeezed my hand weakly. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. You deserved better." "You gave me everything that mattered," I said fiercely. "Music, love, the knowledge that I was worth something. That's more than they ever gave me." She smiled, and for a moment she looked like the grandmother I remembered from childhood, strong, radiant, full of life. "I'm so proud of you, Annabelle. You have a good heart, but you finally learned to guard it. You taught me that." "Then I did something right." Her eyes fluttered closed. "I'm tired now, sweetheart. Stay with me? Always." Grandma Eleanor passed away that evening, peacefully, with my hand in hers. The funeral was held 5 days later at the small church she'd attended for 50 years. Per her wishes, it was simple. No elaborate flowers, no ostentatious displays. Just music, memories, and the people who truly loved her. I played the piano during the service. Not the Steinway, that was gone, but a modest upright that the church had owned for decades. I played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the first piece Grandma ever taught me. The church was half full. Aunt Margaret sat in the front row, tissues clutched in her hand. Grandma's friends from her performing days filled several pews. White-haired women who remembered when Eleanor Whitmore had been a name that meant something in the classical music world. My parents sat in the back. They didn't approach me before the service, or during, or after. My mother wore dark sunglasses that hid her eyes. My father stared straight ahead like a man attending his own sentencing. Megan wasn't there at all. "Too emotionally fragile," my mother explained to someone who asked. I delivered the eulogy. I spoke about Grandma's music, her wisdom, her quiet strength. I spoke about how she'd taught me that love wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up, day after day, and choosing to see someone for who they really were. I didn't mention the drama. The funeral wasn't the place. After the service, my father started walking toward me. I saw him hesitate, take a step, then stop when my mother grabbed his arm and pulled him away. He never made it across the room. Maybe he wanted to apologize, maybe not, I'll never know. But I'd already made peace with the fact that some apologies never come. And some aren't needed anymore. 6 months later, I moved into Grandma's house. It felt strange at first, walking through rooms filled with her presence, sleeping in the guest bedroom I'd known since childhood. But slowly, it began to feel like home. I used part of the returned money to buy a new piano. Not a Steinway. Those cost far more than $95,000. But a beautiful Yamaha Grand that filled the corner where Grandma's piano had once stood. Different, but meaningful in its own way. A new beginning. I started teaching private lessons on weekends. My first student was Aunt Margaret's granddaughter, Sophie, 8 years old, bright-eyed, with the same impatient energy I'd had at her age. When she played her first complete scale, I cried. My parents moved out 2 months after Grandma's death. They didn't wait the full 12 months I'd offered. They said they couldn't live somewhere with so many painful memories. I think they just couldn't stand the reminder of what they'd lost. They bought a small condo across town. My father's business was struggling, scaled down to half its former size. My mother joined a different social club, one where people didn't know the family's history. We didn't speak. Not out of anger exactly, just distance. Some gaps are too wide to bridge. But I wasn't bitter. Bitterness is exhausting, and I had a life to build. In the evenings, I'd sit at the piano and play until the stars came out. Sometimes Chopin, sometimes Bach, sometimes just improvised melodies that went nowhere and everywhere. Grandma's presence lingered in those moments, in the smell of lavender from the garden she'd planted, in the creak of the old floorboards, in the way the light fell through the windows at sunset. She was gone, but she was everywhere, and I was finally free. 8 months after the funeral, my phone rang. Megan. I stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. Anna? Her voice sounded different, smaller, less certain. Megan. Silence stretched between us, 28 years of sisterhood reduced to awkward pauses. I'm not calling to ask for anything, she said finally. I wanted to say something. Okay. I've been thinking a lot. About everything that happened. About how I acted. She took a shaky breath. I was so angry at first. At you, at Grandma, at everyone. I thought you'd stolen something from me. And now? Now? Another pause. Now I'm working at a marketing firm, entry level. I ride the bus because I can't afford a car, and I've started going to therapy. I didn't respond. I just listened. My therapist says I have a lot of unpacking to do. About Mom and Dad, about how I was raised, about why I thought I deserved everything without earning it. She laughed, but it was hollow. Turns out, being the favorite isn't actually a gift. It's a trap. I'm glad you're working through it, I said carefully. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Her voice cracked. I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. Why you did what you did. Why Grandma did what she did. Grandma loved you too, Megan. She just couldn't reward behavior that hurt other people. I know. A sniffle. I know that now. We sat in silence for a moment. If you ever want to talk, I said slowly, I'm willing to listen. But trust takes time to rebuild. I understand. Good. We hung up without saying goodbye, not out of coldness, but because neither of us knew how. Some doors, once closed, open slowly. But they can still open. It's spring now, a full year since Grandma entered hospice. Tonight, I sit at my piano as the sun sets over the garden. The windows are open, and a warm breeze carries the scent of jasmine and freshly cut grass. I play Grandma's favorite nocturne, the one she performed at her final concert 20 years ago. The notes drift through the empty house, filling the silence with something softer. I think about everything that's happened. The betrayal, the reveal, the boundaries I never thought I'd have the courage to set. I think about Grandma, her strength, her patience, her quiet determination to protect me, even when I didn't know I needed protecting. I think about my parents, in their small condo, rebuilding a life that will never be quite what they imagined. About Megan, riding the bus, learning for the first time what it means to earn something. I don't hate them. Hate takes too much energy, but I don't need them anymore either. And that's a kind of freedom I never expected to find. The nocturne ends. The final notes hang in the air, then fade into the evening quiet. I look at Grandma's photograph on the piano, her at 60, radiant, fingers poised over the keys of the Steinway I'll never play again. I'm doing okay, Grandma, I whisper. I'm more than okay. Somewhere, I like to think she hears me. I close the piano lid, stand, and walk to the window. The stars are just beginning to emerge, pinpricks of light in the darkening sky. I don't have the original piano. I don't have the family I thought I had. But I have something better. I have myself. I have boundaries. I have a life I built on truth instead of silence. And that's the real inheritance Grandma left me. And that's my story. Thank you for staying until the end. If this resonated with you, if you've ever had to stand up for yourself in a family that made you feel invisible, I want you to know, you're not alone. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's how you honor your own worth. Hit like if this story meant something to you. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. And check the description for more videos I think you'll love. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you deserve to be seen.